Welcome to CryptoCast, May 2020. I'm Ray Doherty on behalf of the Australian Yowie Project. Welcome. So today we are going to do something a little bit different. I thought we'd start a series reading out of Trove, which is the Australian National Library of Australia, where all the old newspapers are digitised. There's been a few articles that people have published before online talking about Yowie accounts or Hairy Man accounts or Yahoo accounts going back into old ancient Australia. Well, it's not ancient, but old Australia. So I thought it'd be interesting to do a little podcast or a series of podcasts putting together some of this information for your listening pleasure. So the first one we've got is from the Mudgee Guardian and Northwest Representative. That's the name of the newspaper. This article is from Thursday, the 17th of June, 1909. It's titled, Hairy Man. During the past few weeks, the residents of the bar have been disturbed from their slumbers by noises resembling at times a person choking and at other times a woman screaming and then crying. These strange cries remained a mystery till Thursday last, when about 5 p.m. they were again heard, and shortly afterwards several persons residing in the locality were astonished to see a peculiar animal, 5 feet high, standing on two legs, and at the same time brushing away with his claw-like hands the long, unkempt-looking hair from his eyes. The animal is covered with long white hair, and when seen was uttering the cries which have been disturbing the peace of the neighbourhood. The hairy man, or whatever he is, was only seen for a minute, and disappeared as suddenly as he came in. Well, that's a good little short one to start. But the great thing I love about these old newspaper reports is that in those days, unlike media today, they don't push an agenda. They don't push philosophies, or they don't push one side of politics or the other. They simply push and they simply report the facts of what they see or what the witness sees. And that's one of the reasons why I love them. Let's get on to our next one. This next one is from the Clarence and Richmond Examiner, Grafton, Tuesday, June 22nd, 1909. And this is an interesting one, this one. Hairy Man, it's titled. At Hardgraves, while two youths named Summerfield and Lou, that's L-U-E, were lopping Kurrajong for cattle when they heard a peculiar noise, and looking upwards, saw what they described as a hairy man sitting on a rock staring at them. Taking fright, they ran and were pursued by the stranger. In his efforts to escape, Lou fell into the river, being nearly drowned before Summerfield rescued him. They continued their flight towards home. Mrs. Albert Brennan, hearing their cries, hastened to render assistance. The strange man still approached with a lumbering gait as she hastened into the house, closing and barring the door. The stranger followed, and reaching the door, scratched and fumbled about for a considerable time, and then slowly retreated towards the hills. Mrs. Brennan confirmed the boy's statements regarding his appearance, stating that the stranger had long black hair. A search party afterwards scoured the hills, but found nothing. That was pretty interesting, that one, don't you think? I mean, these articles generally are pretty short. There are some longer ones, which we're going to get to, but generally, these are pretty short. Now, here's another one from the Mudgee Guardian, just like our first one, but this is only 7 days later, Thursday, the June 24th, 1909. And it says, the Maitland Bar Hairy Man is spoken of locally in a jesting manner. It is presumed a goatskin plays a prominent part in the tableau. Since the police took a hand in the matter, the frolics of the hairy one are few and far between. Now, this suggests that perhaps it's someone hoaxing the area. This is what obviously the reporter is reporting on, and that's what the police think. So it's gotten to the point now where people are disturbed and they're getting the police involved. So they're coming back now thinking that this is a hoax and that people are playing silly buggers with them. Let's see what else we can find. Here's an interesting one. The year before, on Wednesday the 28th of October 1908. Now, this is not the first story of this nature. This is only a very, very short one, where people living in the bush for a long time, living primitively, shall we say. It's not the first time they've been confused with the actual hairy man. But here's this little article from the Armadale Chronicle on Wednesday, October 28, 1908. Police captured a wild hairy man from the bush near Carcoar, Carcoar, yesterday. I hope I pronounced that right. Apologies if I didn't. His hair was 4 feet long, and he declared he had not washed himself for 8 years and had been living in a small bark hut for 25 years. Now, if you go through the Trove, which is also the website, which is Trove, trove.nla.gov.au, you will find quite a number of these stories of people living in the bush, long-term, 5, 10, 15, 20 years. Long hair, don't bathe, they steal people's food, they steal their cattle, or small livestock, sheep, whatnot, and they eke out an existence. But when people see them for the first time, they mistake them for the hairy men. Anyway, that one was pretty interesting. Moving on to the next one. Now, this next one is from the Southern Argus, Southern Argus, Argus, from Goulburn, New South Wales, on Tuesday, the 5th of May, 1885. Titled, in big letters, The Hairy Man. Some excitement was caused here, says the Inverell Argus of Saturday last, about 2 years ago, by reports furnished by visitors to the Big River of the mysterious appearances of an object whose precise character or description the narrators were at a loss to give. Various members of fishing parties returned to town and related with bated breath how, at different times, and sometimes under lonely and trying circumstances, they had seen a figure, the like of which they in vain searched for among their friends and acquaintances. The object was described by some as resembling a gorilla. By others, it was not doubted for a moment that the great bunyip had made its appearance. While we can all well remember that a few, sceptical as to anything out of the ordinary, averred that the apparition represented no less a personage than Sally Walker, an aboriginal well known in the Inverell at the time. Be this as it may, the sensation has again been revived. A young man named McRae informs us that on Good Friday, when fishing at Big River, he noticed an object apparently swimming and coming towards him. He threw a stone, and then the figure turned away. He then took his gun and fired upon it. Upon this mysterious stranger sprang about 6 feet into the air and rapidly swimming to the other side of the shore, disappearing in the bush. McRae describes it as black and hairy, and the shape hereof unknown to him. Query: can it be a gorilla in these parts? We shall await with interest the solution of the mystery by some hardy fishermen. Now, it's interesting that they give a description underneath this, not a description, rather like a warning, almost like a disclaimer by today's standards, that perjury is wrong, that it's unlawful to make a false complaint. So rather than accept that it possibly was a yowie at first, they first blamed a local Indigenous resident. But yet then they had another sighting which said they clearly said looked nothing like the descriptions that they previously had. And then, of course, they have this other description that looks nothing like a human or an Indigenous person as we know. I don't know about you, but I think it's pretty fascinating and pretty interesting. Let's see if we can find a couple more. It's also worth noting that early syndication was also available. So some of these stories are also appearing in Queensland newspapers as well as Western Australian newspapers. Now here's an interesting little one, little short story from the Nepean Times, Penrith, New South Wales, Saturday, October 24th, 1903. It's actually on page 3. It's called The Hairy Man. On Friday morning, Mr. F, I suppose you pronounce it Han or Lahan, Lahn, of Margowie, while on his road to Penrith, was accosted by a man at the ruins in Glenlee. And when he would not stop, the fellow tried to intercept the horse, and he was driving. When he would not stop, the fellow tried to intercept the horse. He was driving and failing in that. Started throwing stones, none of which, however, struck Mr. Lahan. The latter made all haste into Penrith, warning persons as he came along, and reported the matter to Sergeant Morris, with Constable Pritchard, went in pursuit. The man is described as medium height with very long hair and whiskers, poorly clad and without boots. Now, Mr. Hahn, to the time of going to the police, there's something other mentioned here is also very hard to translate, but basically the report, nothing ever came of it. It was never seen again. But this is interesting. So a gentleman going to Penrith, along with his horse, was accosted by one in the middle of the road, and he was telling whoever he came across about it. The police went and looked for it. They saw it, but then there's no mention of what happens next. Now, either they don't know or they didn't want to talk about it, but it was a pretty fascinating information. This next one is from the Albury Banner and Wodonga Express. Friday, June 25, 1909, page 33. A report from Hargraves, New South Wales. The scare at the Maitland Bar has taken another form. So this is a syndicated story. Yes, we've actually already read this, but it's updated. So let's update the story from the bar, or the Maitland Bar as they call it. While two youths named Summerfield and Lou were among the hills lopping Kurrajong for cattle, they heard a noise. And I'm paraphrasing here. Upwards saw what they described as a hairy man sitting on the rocks. We talked about Mrs. Brennan coming to the rescue, and this creature person continued to pursue them before scouring into the hair. Now, the appearance, they say, had a long black hair. The search party afterwards scurried the hills. So they sent out a search party looking for this thing, scurried the hills, but saw no trace of the unwelcome visitor. The district is very mountainous and there are plenty of hiding places. Now, a couple of really interesting points here. The people of the time, the residents of the area, described it as a man, not as a creature. The newspaper journalists report it as a man, not as a creature. The police, what we've seen so far, have been quick to try and find other examples, either saying it was a local Indigenous resident or someone walking around in a goat skin creating a hoax, but they don't use the word hoax. It's very, very interesting as to how things were reported in those days. This has been the first episode of CryptoCast Tales from the Past. I hope you enjoyed it, and we'll get to do some more very, very soon. Thanks for listening.